Molt bé, bona tarda a tothom. Gràcies per venir. Gràcies al professor Damasio per acceptar la invitació. Gràcies a la Fundació Catalunya La Pedrera per permetre aquest tipus d'activitat i aquesta en particular. I gràcies a tots vosaltres per venir. Aquest és un privilegi, penso, per vosaltres tant com per mi. Faré una petita presentació del professor Damasio, que no caldrà segurament per molts de vosaltres, però que no està de més. El professor Damasio és catedràtic de Neurociència, Psicologia i Filosofia de la Universitat de Califòrnia del Sud i director de l'Institut de Cervell i Creativitat de la mateixa universitat. El professor Damasio va estudiar Medicina a la Facultat de Medicina de la Universitat de Lisboa, on va realitzar també la seva rotació com a resident i la va completar amb el seu doctorat. Més tard es va traslladar als Estats Units, on ha fet la seva carrera. El professor Damasio ha rebut molts premis, entre altres el Premi Príncep d'Astúries, el Premi Signoret, i ha estat nomenat investigador molt citat per l'Institut d'Informació de Califòrnia i també té doctorats honoraris a diverses universitats. Com a assagista científic, segurament coneixeu tots els seus llibres, L'error de Descartes, El sentiment de lo que pasa, Cuerpo y emoción en la construcción de la conciencia, A la búsqueda de Spinoza, El cerebro creó el hombre, i avui presentarem també el seu llibre L'extraño orden de les coses, que us el recomano molt especialment. Com a investigador, el professor Damasio té com a camp prioritari d'interès les bases neurobiològiques de la ment, especialment pel que fa als sistemes neuronals subjacents a la memòria, el llenguatge, les emocions i el processament de les decisions. En aquests àmbits, el professor Damasio ha realitzat contribucions fonamentals a la comprensió dels processos cerebrals, de les emocions, els sentiments, la presa de decisions i la consciència. Potser la idea del professor Damasio que ha tingut més influència és la que es coneix com a marcador somàtic. Els marcadors somàtics són estats corporals associats a les emocions, als sentiments, com l'associació del ritme cardíac amb l'angoixa o les nàusees amb el disgust. En les seves investigacions relacionades amb aquesta hipòtesi, el professor Damasio ha identificat àrees i circuits específics del cervell que gestionen aquests marcadors. I amb aquesta proposta del professor Damasio va proporcionar en el seu dia una validació científica contemporània del vincle entre els sentiments i el cos, destacant la connexió entre la ment i el cervell. La hipòtesi del marcador somàtic ha inspirat moltíssims experiments en neurociències realitzats als laboratoris de tot el món i que encara es porten a terme de manera quotidiana. Abans de començar, de tota manera, voldria que paressin atenció que estan davant d'un esdeveniment excepcional, estan davant del que aquí anomenem un savi, una eminència, un messi de les neurociències. El professor Damasio ha estat nomenat per l'Institut de la Informació Científica com un dels investigadors més citats de l'última dècada. Els treballs actuals sobre la biologia de les decisions morals, la neuroeconomia, la comunicació social i l'addicció a les drogues han estat fonamentalment influïdes pels seus treballs. Un article recent publicat a l'Arxiu de Psicologia Científica el va anomenar com un dels 100 neurocientífics i psicòlegs més eminents de l'era moderna i fa poc una revista que es diu Science Humans el va incloure com a la llista dels seus 50 pensadors més importants dels darrers 2 segles. Jo diria que en el meu àmbit, en l'àmbit de les neurociències, el professor Damasio ha marcat un abans i un després. Podríem aplicar una cronologia similar a la que usem per establir el calendari occidental. Si diem abans i després de Crist, jo crec que podríem dir ara abans i després del professor Damasio, sense exagerar. Realment la seva influència ha estat molt important a les nostres neurociències. O sigui que moltes gràcies, professor, per estar aquí. El que faré serà introduir una sèrie de temes del seu llibre amb textos propis que llegiré en català del seu llibre i li donaré paraula amb ell perquè estengui, expliqui, descrigui una miqueta més precisament aquests textos. Començaré per 2 aspectes terminològics que són fonamentals en el llibre. Un és molt típic de la seva literatura, un és més aviat nou, i aquest és el que m'agradaria començar perquè ens expliqués ell. És el terme homeostasi. Homeostasi és un terme utilitzat en biologia, en química, en física, però que ell utilitza d'una manera molt precisa per explicar aspectes fonamentals de la ment i el cervell. Llegeixo 3 seccions del seu llibre i li dono la paraula. Segons el professor Damasio, diu l'homeostasi es refereix al procés pel qual es contrarresta la tendència de la matèria cap al desordre, amb la finalitat de mantenir l'ordre, però a un nou nivell, el que permet un major grau d'estabilitat vital. L'homeostasi no és un estat neutre, sinó és un estat regulat per accions orientades, i això és molt important, cap a l'augment del benestar. L'homeostasi és resistència i prevalença. Que la vida es reguli de manera que no solament sigui compatible amb la supervivència, sinó que contribueixi també a la prosperitat o una projecció de la vida cap al futur d'un organisme o d'una espècie. Professor, voldria extendre l'explicació una miqueta més, diguem-ne, elaborada sobre el terme homeostasi.
Very good, with great pleasure. I'm sorry that I'm not going to be very good at explaining things to you in Spanish or in Catalan, although I used to think that I was not able to understand Catalan. I could understand Spanish but not Catalan, but I'm getting better. I think I'm getting most of it, although I think it's better if you stick to English to be sure that we are on the right track. But at any rate, it's a great pleasure to be here. First of all, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to talk to you as a thinker and scientist, so it really makes life easy and pleasant. And it's always a great pleasure to be in Barcelona anyway. So the definition of homeostasis is critical. And it's critical because traditionally, when people hear the word homeostasis, they think of something stable, which unfortunately comes from that root, stasis. And so people think about something fixed, which is a problem because it's not fixed at all, it's constantly changing. And also people think about equilibrium. People think about balance, as if the state of homeostasis was a state in which things were sort of in the middle as well as possible. And this is rather tricky because, especially when you think about a thermodynamic system such as life is, if you have equilibrium, what you get is death. Equilibrium really means that everything gets stable and it tends towards nothing, tends towards death. And life is exactly the opposite of death. Life is a state where you are sort of resisting the tendency of things to decline and disappear. And what happens really is that there is a choice that is made automatically by living systems among different stable levels, different steady states, which occur in the chemistry of our life, and the nature automatically in the living state chooses the steady state that is most likely to produce the continuation of life. So it's as if we have in our chemistry, that the chemistry of living creatures, you have a condition in which nature automatically selects the state that is going to be most conducive to continuing life, to resisting as long as possible, come what may. And that is a state in which you can gather energy and allow that energy to feed the system so that life continues. It certainly cannot be without energy. If you don't have energy, the system collapses and life disappears. And then there's something else that is very tricky, is that not only does the system gather energy to maintain itself alive, but it generally tends to gather more energy than it needs which results in a surplus of energy. So to be in a homeostatic state, it's a bit like all of us at the end of the month. We look at our savings and our economies, and we want to have a little bit more money in the bank than is needed to pay the bills. Okay? Now, it's very interesting because I think this should allow you to dream a little bit, which is what we should do when we're reading books about life and science in general. And don't just look at this as if it's just portraying life in the strict sense. It's portraying life, but at the same time, it's inspiring you to think about a variety of things in our own dealings, say, as individuals in a culture, in society, and things that are almost magically modeled on what is actually happening at very simple levels. So, to make a long story short, homeostasis is a state of regulation that allows life to continue and saves something. Our energy balance should always be a little bit more than what we need. And you know, one practical reason is that because our life is so complicated, we're constantly subject to stresses. And if you are in stress, the stress that is caused, for example, by disease, suppose you have the flu, or suppose you have some other bad infection, or you have a cancer that you have to deal with. Those are conditions that stress the system brutally. And if you only have the energy in your cells that you need for the moment, because the demand is much higher, that's when you really get very sick, and that's when you can die. So nature has built a system of regulation that is very adapted to our real conditions, and it saves something in general so that we can, it's like having energy for the day next or the hour next, which is a very interesting and beautiful idea. And if you don't have those savings, that's when you are in trouble. And just to conclude a comment on homeostasis, there is another word that you can use, although it's been tried and people actually don't use it that much, and that's the word homeodynamics. I actually refer to it in the book, but people have tried and proposed. For example, there's a British biologist by the name of Stephen Rose that proposed the term homeodynamics, and a couple of other biologists did too, and nobody uses it. So people continue using homeostasis. So when you read about this literature, what you find is that people say, terrible, that word homeostasis, you shouldn't use it, it's very difficult to define, and it inspires this idea of stability. But then when you produce another word and you ask people to use it, people don't use it. So it's like that.
Ho hauríem de fer. L'altre terme sobre el que jo volia que comencéssim, que és molt important en la seva, diguem-ne, el seu corpus teòric, que és on ha donat més influència, és el concepte de sentiments. No? I aquest concepte llegiré un text una miqueta més llarg de l'anterior, on explica uns aspectes bàsics del seu concepte de sentiments. Diu el professor Damasio, els sentiments són experiències mentals i per definició són conscients. No tindríem coneixement directe d'ells si no ho fossin, si no fossin conscients. Però els sentiments difereixen d'altres experiències mentals en diversos aspectes. Primer, el seu contingut sempre es refereix al cos de l'organisme en el qual s'originen. Els sentiments representen l'interior de l'organisme, l'estat dels òrgans interns i dels processos interns, i les condicions sota les quals aquestes representacions es distingeixen de les representacions del món exterior. Segon, com a resultat d'aquestes condicions especials, la representació de l'estat interior, és a dir, de l'experiència de la sensació, té una característica especial denominada valència. La valència qualifica l'estat vital com a bo, dolent o com a d'un grau intermedi entre tots dos. Quan experimentem un estat propici, ho descrivim en termes positius i ho qualifiquem com agradable. Quan aquest estat, en canvi, no resulta propici, descrivim aquesta experiència en termes negatius i parlem d'una situació desagradable. La valència és l'element que defineix el sentiment i, per extensió, l'afecte. Seguidament diu els sentiments serveixen per a la regulació de la vida, proporcionar informació referida a la homeostasi bàsica o a les condicions socials de la nostra vida. El sentiment ens informen dels riscos, dels perills i de les crisis momentànies que és necessari evitar. Si vol extendre's una mica més, com ell ja coneix, en català i en castellà, no té la mateixa correspondència amb certs termes anglesos. Els sentiments, les emocions, les motivacions tenen unes connotacions que no tenen les mateixes en anglès que s'utilitzen per definir aquests termes. Si volgués extendre's una mica més en aquest concepte.
Very good. I'm really having fun with the Catalan. I didn't know that I was able to understand it. It's great. I thought I couldn't understand it. It's terrific. Does he speak Catalan very well? Yeah, maybe he has a special way with the Catalan. I understand everything. It's great. Okay. Okay, so we have these terms that are really, well, there's one key part of what he read, which is the idea of valence. What really distinguishes, and I'll talk about feelings and emotions and try to distinguish that, but the thing that is so important is that there are really two kinds of mental life we have. I like to say that we live life in two registers. One register is the one that people very commonly associate with mentality and intellect. And that has to do with very precise things such as perception. Even you're perceiving me visually, you're hearing the words that I'm speaking and the sounds, and all of that requires a tremendous amount of precision, because if it's not precise, say the visual perception, you get a blur. If you don't perceive in a very detailed way the sounds that I'm pronouncing, you're not going to understand it. So perception needs to be precise. Movement needs to be precise. Otherwise, you're going to miss your target. The kind of memories that you form of the perceptions you make needs to be precise. Otherwise, when you remember, it's going to be a mess. You don't want that. Reasoning needs to be precise, especially when it involves language or when it involves another special language, which is the language of mathematics. So all of those aspects of our mental life need to be extremely precise and well registered. They have a certain value, and that's the value they should have. The world of feeling, the world of sentiments, is a completely different world. It's a world where what counts is qualities. And the qualities need to be defined along a scale of things that are pleasant, rewarding, and pleasant and rewarding being the key words. And at the other end, things that are punishing, therefore not rewarding, and things that are unpleasant. And you could sort of have another way of describing this, talk about the line that leads into pain and suffering on the one hand, and the line that leads into well-being and pleasure and flourishing on the other. So just think about how different this is. One aspect of our minds has to do with qualities, with moods and states that can be good or not so good, and that have that quality that technically is known as valence. And the other is about things that are precise, things that are exactly what they are, and they don't need to be necessarily classified as pleasant or unpleasant, although they can be. So we need to recognize that there are these two worlds going on in our minds, and we need to recognize that the source of the valence, the pleasantness or unpleasantness, is actually the state of our life inside the organism. So we derive the notion of pleasure or the notion of pain from the states of our body. That's what gave the rise to this, and that's what gives you the quality of your life. Otherwise, you would live, guess what, like an automaton. You would live like a robot. That's what artificial intelligence does, is create a world where there's no quality, because there's no life. What there is something that is invented by, it's placed in a computational system, and it's a completely different thing from what we're talking about. We're talking about, we all in this room, we are living, and we are living on certain days very well, on certain days if you're sick or if you're sad or, something bad happened in your life, not so well. And there's this constant variation of quality, this variation of mood. You may wake up in the morning and say, I don't have any energy today. Well, that's not a precise thing. It's something that is happening because the chemistries in your organism are flowing in a certain way, and because you have either slept very badly or you're coming down with a cold or something like that. That's a mood. It's imprecise, and it's that very imprecision that's the nice thing that we need to capture. And so when some people in the world of robotics or artificial intelligence say, oh, well, we're going to be able, with artificial intelligence, to create everything that human beings are. Not true. What you're going to be able to create is very, very intelligent creatures, the robots, the computational systems, that can actually be smarter than we are because they have access to all the memory in the world. They can go into the cloud and get all the memory in the world, and they can reason in very fast and very effective ways. That's why they can beat you at checkers. That's why they can beat you in a game like the game of Go. But that doesn't mean that those systems feel, and they don't. Why don't they feel? Because they don't have a living organism. Feelings without a living organism is an absurd concept. It's nothing. It cannot work that way. And this is very important for us to be quite aware of, because when people say that we are going to have lifelike creatures invented by Silicon Valley, that is not true. We may have creatures that are even smarter than we are, and that's very important, and that's useful. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against artificial intelligence, on the contrary. I just don't want to hear people say that they're going to create a computer that is going to be like me, because nothing is going to be like me or like you. We are different things, and we have qualities that cannot be imitated, at least not today. Maybe in 100 years, I don't know. We're not going to be around to know, but maybe that will happen. So, just one more thing to make sure I answer one of his questions in Catalan. Keep in mind the distinction between emotions and feelings, because it's absolutely vital. If you don't make that distinction, all of this field is going to be a great big mess, a great salad. You don't want that. An emotion, as the name implies, comes out of the root for movement. When you emote, you make a movement to the outside. For example, if you now would come here and would frighten me, with a noise or whatever, I would go like this, and so would you. So you have a set of reactions that are movements. You can be startled, you can get rigid, you can recoil, you act. These are all actions, and they're very visible to others. They're public. It's something that is happening in the open realm. Anybody can see them, okay? And you have expressions in your face. You can have an expression of fear or you can have an expression of joy or an expression of sadness. All of that is public. Feelings, on the other hand, are things that happen in the mind only. They're experiences, and the feelings that each of us has is private and can only be transmitted by telling somebody about what I'm feeling. But you're not going to come into my mind and see my feelings or feel my feelings, because my feelings are felt as a result of the state in which my body is. And this is something that I find very simple and very beautiful, but it's the main problem in trying to have people understand this field, because people don't recognize that feelings are a different thing from emotions. And then the problem gets worse, because when you have simple organisms, let's take an amoeba or bacteria, those single-cell organisms actually emote. Those single-cell organisms, if you go with a blunt instrument or with a pin under the microscope, the equivalent of a pin, and you touch one of those organisms, what they do is recoil. What is that? That's a reaction of quote-unquote fear. They are withdrawing as a result of the built-in homeostasis to defend itself and to defend the integrity of the organism against an attack. But do those organisms feel? I would suggest no. They don't have a nervous system. They cannot construct a mind the way we do. They can sense things, but they cannot represent a configuration. See, the very big difference is that right now you look at me, and through your visual processing, you can not only sense that I'm here, and you can also sense through what I'm saying, because you can hear the auditory stimuli, but you also can represent a configuration. There's something in your mind right now through your visual system that represents the configuration of Antonio Damasio talking, agitating his hands, sitting in a Mies van der Rohe chair, okay? In a building by Gaudi. That's interesting. So all of those are configurations that are in your mind. Not only that, they're there now in terms of current representation, and you can make memories of it. Because tomorrow, if somebody asks you, so did you hear Damasio yesterday at La Pedrera? You will say yes, and when they ask you that, you will have a flash of something that's not exactly like your perception now, but it resembles it. There's going to be a sketch of my configuration. Well, that happens because we have nervous systems that are able to map the world outside and the world inside and create a configuration out of it, and then remember some of it. And by the way, feelings are made out of configurations of the organism at the moment. So when you are in fear and you have a sense of constriction of your trachea, and your gut contracts, and you go into a very fast heart rate, and your heart is beating, and you feel that your face is pale. All of those are changes in your body, and the feeling of fear is the experience of all those things that changed in your body and that are being represented in your brain as configurations thanks to mapping. So the poor amoeba and the poor bacteria, which are very, very smart creatures, they have been here for 4 billion years, they know how to live. But they know how to live automatically and blindly. They actually do not know that they are alive, and they are not conscious of those effects, but we are conscious because we have, through nervous systems, the access to this possibility of feeling experience and feeling qualities that are given by the state of our lives.
Estan atents, suposo. No sé quan hauran pagat vostès, 4 euros em sembla que han pagat. Són els euros més baratos que han gastat.
I missed that. I didn't get that.
Deia que quan els havia costat l'entrada i que eren els euros més baratos que havien gastat en la seva vida, que estessin atents, perquè aquesta era una oportunitat única d'escoltar una cosa que no tornaran a escoltar en la seva vida. O sigui, és allò de Woodstock, no? Jo vaig ser allà, doncs vostès han estat aquí. Bé...
Thank you.
No, és la veritat. Ara voldria entrar en alguns dels temes específics del llibre que presenta, que són idees molt innovadores que no només afecten a la neurociència, sinó també afecten a la biologia en general. Són idees innovadores en ciència i que ell exposa de manera molt entenedora en el llibre. I m'agradaria que ens expliqués una miqueta més aquest tipus de temes centrals específics del llibre. I aquest era relacionar un dels termes que hem vist, homeostasi, amb l'evolució, amb la teoria de l'evolució. Hi ha una frase que m'ha fet molta... m'ha saltat als ulls en un moment de la lectura del llibre, que diu: l'homeostasi connecta els bacteris amb els humans. I ell explica, dona aquest terme, li dona aquesta formulació que és l'imperatiu homeostàtic, on diu que l'homeòstasi, tal com l'ha explicat prèviament, ha guiat l'evolució de tots els éssers vius, fins a nosaltres. I diuen textualment, per exemple, el desenvolupament de l'aparell genètic que ajuda a regular de manera òptima la vida i a transmetre als seus descendents no és concebible sense l'homeostasi. O en un altre moment diu: cada cèl·lula, a partir de la primera, manifesta sempre una intenció poderosa i aparentment irrefrenable de mantenir-se viva i de seguir endavant. O sigui, des de les cèl·lules això és així. I relaciona això amb certs conceptes filosòfics molt clàssics, com els que menciono aquí, que diu: aquesta intenció irrefrenable correspon a la força que el filòsof Spinoza va intuir i a la qual va denominar conatos. O el poeta Paul Éluard, aquí com m'ha mencionat també, va escriure sobre el doux désir de durer, perdó pels francesos, el doux desig de durada, és a dir, de permanència. El conatus és la força que, en paraules de Schrödinger, contrarresta la tendència natural de les coses a passar al desordre. Schopenhauer també va expressar una idea similar, aquesta idea de la voluntat de viure. Això és una idea molt original, és una idea molt interessant i que no sé si volgués extendre sobre ella.
Well, one thing that you remind me of is something I think is very real. We as humans created, of course, a very complex culture that includes the arts, that includes religious beliefs, moral systems, systems of governance, and of course technology and science. And what is interesting is that because all of those developments were caused by homeostatic need, they all have a relationship to the origin of life and to homeostasis. That's one of the ideas that I find so intriguing and so beautiful. Yes, a bacterium is a very simple thing, and you tend not to pay too much attention to it, although you have to be careful because there are more bacterial cells in each of our bodies than there are non-bacterial cells. Isn't that amazing? So we have, when you count all the cells that are in our systems, that are, you could describe as cells that are part of the human body, period. There are fewer than the number of cells that are bacterial that are colonizing our skin, our throat, and our gut. They're everywhere. They have different species. They're, for example, different colonies of bacteria that are in here, in this region, or in our armpits, or in our throats. Different colonies, and they're living. Most of them, by the way, they're extremely good. We have this idea that bacteria are bad things because, of course, there are some bacteria that can infect you and kill you unless you have an antibiotic. But the majority of bacteria are, in fact, living in very nice cohabitation with us, and they are absolutely essential to our life to defend us against certain bad bugs and to maintain the function of the gut, which is essential for the function of the overall system. So it's very important whenever we say, well, bacteria are simple, one cell, no mind, no nervous system. We have to be careful because they are extremely intelligent. They're just not intelligent the way we are, but they are very intelligent. And we are related to them because, in a way, it's from life at that level that came the very big life that we're leading on today. And as I said, they've been around for almost 4 billion years, and we have been around for a few thousand years. So it's a little bit different, the scale. Theirs is the advantage. But what is interesting is to think how certain aspects of our culture, not just science, but think of the arts, how because of that relation to these very fundamental pressures of our life and evolution, end up expressing what the science could do, but through the world of poetry. And you know, I've always loved very much this line, which is from Paul Éluard, the French poet, which talks about le dur désir de durer. This idea that there is a desire to maintain life and to continue. This is a very good description of what homeostasis does with us, to push us forward to continue. And it's very interesting because one way in which poetically you can talk about homeostasis is to talk about desire. We have a desire to live. Of course, the word desire very often is taken only in the sense of sensuous and sensual desire, sexual desire, and so forth. But desire is a terrific word to describe what life is all about. It is about desire. There are desires of many different kinds. There's a desire to eat, for example, and a desire to drink. If we did not have a desire to eat and drink, we would not really have hunger or thirst, and guess what? We would die. It's essential to the way we transact our life. And those desires also do something because we have a mind, because we can talk about them in the mental sense as well as in the basic biological sense. They do something very important, which is give us a different level of homeostatic regulation. So bacteria only have basic homeostasis, but we have homeostasis that is through feeling, that gives us the possibility of guiding our life with our own intention, with the little bit of free will that we have. And we do have some free will, not all the free will in the world, but we have some. So because we have feelings, because we can be, for example, watch somebody suffering and decide that we need to stop that, that gives us an authority and a possibility of acting that bacteria don't have, and that the majority of animals don't have, because even if they have some feelings, they don't have, the feeling is not combined with the intellect to allow you to do the right thing at the right moment. And so with us, you have feelings opening up the world of possibilities because we also have intellect. Yesterday, somebody was interviewing me in a very interesting interview, and I was reminded of a very nice phrase of Freud, was a very interesting thinker. You know, Freud, in the world of science, Freud, there was, of course, a period of great success for Freud, and then with the progress of biology, people started thinking that, well, maybe Freud was not so smart, and they sort of pushed him aside. And there's plenty of great intelligence and capacity in Freudian thinking. I mean, Freud is not over. Don't just dismiss him. And I have lots of criticisms of Freud, but I think he was remarkable. And he has remarkable statements, especially in what became his last book, which is, in English is called Civilization and Its Discontents. And it's a book that he wrote in 1931. Another bad time for humanity. And in that book, he has a very interesting question. He says, I always wonder, says Freud, why is it that animals don't have cultural struggles? It's a very interesting question. It's very startling, and he doesn't give the answer. And I don't know if he doesn't give the answer because he couldn't think of an answer, or because he just wants us to keep thinking about it. And I think there's an answer. And the answer is that the animals, even very smart animals, have feelings like we do, but they don't have the intellect to be able to create a culture, and therefore to create all the clashes that happen in our cultures with what we invent culturally. You know, today we have conflicts about everything. We have conflicts about identity, cultural identity. We have conflicts about beliefs. We have conflicts about economy, modes of governance. It's one great big mess. And that mess is necessary at this point in cultural evolution because we have all this speciation. You have all these varieties of things that are now constructed by humans. And of course, you know, you can have wonderful dogs and wonderful elephants and wonderful, dolphins, and they don't build any culture in our sense. So they don't have cultural struggles. They can just struggle about food or something very simple, but they're not going to have struggles about whom they're going to vote for.
Well, maybe they should.
Maybe they should.
Ja se m'ha escapat, ja. Anava a preguntar-li sobre una cosa que he dit específicament. Bueno, hi ha dos línies que ha apuntat en la seva resposta que jo potser afegeixo. Una és, com hem dit, ell ha parlat de l'homeostasi i la evolució, ha donat aquesta idea de que hi ha una voluntat de permanèixer, d'avançar, de millorar, i la lliga en el llibre amb les seves hipòtesis sobre els sentiments. No? I aleshores diu que l'homeostasi guia l'evolució i els sentiments catalitzen respostes que produeixen l'evolució. Els sentiments van fer que la vida fos millor. Van perllongar i van salvar vides. Els sentiments es van ajustar als objectius de l'imperatiu homeostàtic i van ajudar a implementar-les fent que mentalment tinguessin importància per qui els experimentava. D'alguna manera ell diu que els sentiments són l'experiència subjectiva de l'homeostasi i que els sentiments ens informen de quina és la decisió correcta i ens ho fan sense paraules, ens ho diuen com ens indiquen. No?
Absolutely correct. That's exactly what it is, and it's that's what produces the new opening and the possibility of acting intentionally, and then getting us into that aspect, which is, as I said, quite obvious, the aspect of cultural struggle. So we have the homeostasis at the basic level functions pretty well. And there are situations in which it doesn't function well. So if you are very, very sick, if you have a disease like cancer, or if you have an infection that cannot be controlled, then the whole thing spirals down, and of course you die. But that's easier to control, and most of the time it works well. The thing that is more difficult is for homeostasis to work at the social and cultural level. Because at the social and cultural level, you can go through periods in which things work very well, but then the new aspects of conflict that emerge when the situations change, and you can enter periods of big confrontation and huge problems. So, I mean, we all know that in the past century, we went through a period of huge disruptions of cultural homeostasis, if you would want. I mean, you can think of the First World War, you can think of the development of what became the Soviet Gulag, you can think of the development of Nazism and the Holocaust. Those were absolutely horrendous perturbations of cultural systems that ended up being not corrected, but suspended only through huge sacrifices and wars and major death. And then we at a certain point, we reach a sort of pause after 1945, and you have the logical thing to do. People had suffered so much that they realized that with more education and with more ability to have certain rules about behavior, establishing rights for humanity that should not be violated, having things like the United Nations, it would be possible to stabilize those conflicts. And that worked actually for a good number of decades in some parts of the world, not all. And now we're entering a period in which we obviously are having huge confrontations once again, and huge threats and risks. And those, I think there are many ways of explaining why they're occurring. But the fact is that we are entering a phase of huge risks, and they have to do with the way, in my view, with the way we have in part mismanaged our culture in terms of transforming our culture in a culture of pure consumption and a culture where everything is turned into entertainment. Of course, we love to tell stories, and that's part of our humanity. Humans make narratives and tell stories. But right now, everything has to be a story, and it has to be entertaining. And that comes out of a model of entertainment of the 20th century that has now been used together with the exploitation of that model for commercial reasons. So we have a lot of complex things developing there. And then we have the speed at which information is being delivered by devices such as our phones and our computers in general, and the speed of information is such that the ability to think with reflection over what is happening is being rapidly diminished. You're reacting the entire day to what is coming over us and telling us about the world of facts that is occurring, both real and invented, and that's of course very troubling. People don't have a way of thinking intelligently about the problems. And then, of course, when you are in those conditions, you end up having some of our very deep nature, our deep emotional nature, react with very bad emotions to that. But this is probably a good time to remind us that when people sometimes say, well, we need to think more, we need to reason, we need to be sort of very, very careful about suppressing our emotions. And I would say this is very, very wrong. And this is very inconsiderate in relation to our natures. Why? Because we have a sort of dual ability emotionally. Of course, we have things like anger and fear and despair and contempt and pride, lots of very negative emotions that very often end up, when they are engaged, producing increased conflict, conflicts worsen, nothing can be solved, and they very often end up in violence. But at the same time, we have a huge number of other emotions, such as love, compassion, caring, a desire for sublime experiences and elevation, admiration, all of those emotions that are very, very positive and that in fact make life better. So it's not that we need to suppress emotions and kill them off. What we need is to suppress negative emotions and to emphasize positive emotions that can make life better. And it is entirely false to think that we're going to solve our problems just by reason. If you think that facts and reason are going to solve your problems, what you're going to get is a dictator that says, do this dogmatically. And that's not the way human beings work. Because nobody can come to us and tell us to do things in a certain way if that person does not negotiate with us in an effective way, and if it does not engage our emotions and feelings. I mean, they can do that at the point of a gun, and that's normally how these things end. If you can, when you want to impose a model of rationality, it normally doesn't work just by talking, so it works, or by command, so it works at the point of a gun. And that's obviously what we want to avoid. So we live in a very complicated world because we're getting all this fast information. When you get information, especially in relation to certain problems, the problems that now appear all over the world in the form of populisms, and they express themselves in anger. And of course, once the anger is the expression, it's very difficult to negotiate, to get it back on track, some kind of agreeable negotiation. That's a real problem. But it's not the problem of emotions per se. It's a problem of the bad emotions and the fact that we are built in with a very considerable number of tendencies in a good number of us that are very violent and that can express themselves very badly. And there again, let's bring up poor old Freud. And Freud talked very poetically about a death instinct and a life and love instinct. I think it was pretty smart. I think it was a very, very good way of putting it poetically. And guess what? When you go to our brainstem, just below the level of our cortex, there are parts of the brainstem where very small regions can, if activated, produce reactions of anger and fear and the desire to destroy. So we are all built with that inside of us. Of course, we're very different. Some of us express more anger and violence than others. And, of course, depending on the culture in which we exist, those tendencies towards violence and destruction can have been sort of nurtured or suppressed. There's only one way to do it, is by repeated civilizational efforts and by repeated education. And even that sometimes doesn't work. But I don't think there's any doubt that what we are suffering right now, among many other things, is from a lack of a systematic civilizational effort that matches the complexity of our lives. And of course, when you complete that with the possibility of, for example, manipulating elections through devices of digital information, then we're lost if we go that way.
Yes. Acabarem parlant després sobre aquest aspecte, aquest diagnòstic de la societat contemporània, però volia incidir en una cosa que ha dit que és molt important i que ell connecta també en el llibre, que és la importància dels sentiments en la cultura. No els hem d'apartar. I ell diu coses molt interessants que m'agradaria que comentés. Diu, la meva idea és, en essència, que l'activitat cultural va començar profundament unida als sentiments. i que aquesta unió ha romàs intacta. La interacció tan favorable com desfavorable entre el sentiment i la raó ha de ser presa en compte si pretenem comprendre els conflictes i les contradiccions de la condició humana. I aleshores diu dues coses molt interessants. Diu, els sentiments són els grans absents de la història de la cultura. Els sentiments són les presències no reconegudes en les taules de conferència cultural. Jo li volia preguntar si això també creu que és possible que sigui causat per, ara que en parlem cada cop més, per una certa posició masclista que ha tingut la història cultural. Sempre hem estat els homes com a no dones, els que hem donat, hem fet la història, hem fet la cultura, hem fet l'art. I aquesta absència de sentiments en la cultura pot ser deguda en part per aquesta visió patriarcal de la història.
It probably has a role to play there. I would say that the interesting thing to say, first of all, is that the absence of feelings in the general appreciation of the culture is very much tied to what dominates a culture and what dominates certain fields. For example, if you go to a group of artists, say people that compose and play music or write poetry or paint, you're likely to get a reaction from them saying, well, no, not really. Feelings are very much a part of my life. And that's true. If they analyze their work well, feelings are a very strong presence in people who compose or people who play music or people who write or recite poetry or work in the plastic arts. Very often are very aware of their feelings and of the fact that feelings push them into doing things. Now, our culture these days is not dominated by the arts. Let's be clear about that. For example, I don't know about what happens in Catalonia, but for sure that in the curriculum of most countries, including the United States, funding for education in visual arts or music or literature has been systematically cut. People know less and less about the history of the arts. People know less and less about poetry. I don't know how you can live your life without knowing about Shakespeare, but they do. They have no idea. And so you're being cut from a great part of the generation of what is our tradition culturally. And when you do that, you're already pushing aside this world where feelings really were important, patriarchally or not. And then there's something that is really prevailing. And what is prevailing is that register of greater precision that is away from moods and sentiments, but has to do with the precision of computation, the precision of math. You know how education right now is in fact dominated by things that can lead to engineering, to mathematics, to training in computation. And of course, I'm not saying that that's not important. It's obviously important. The question is that it cannot be taught and developed in the absence of the rest, because our life is not about computation. Our life is about computation, but about feeling. It's about well-being or suffering. And if you ignore that, you're going to be fine for a world of robots, but you're not going to be fine for a world of human beings. So what has changed is the way in which the culture of precision and computation has come to dominate our conversation, and has come to dominate, for example, the world of information, the digital world, and that is, of course, where the great big risk is, in my view. So it's a question of imbalance. And then you cannot understand human beings when you are strictly at that level of operations.
Una de les coses que he mencionat aquí en diverses ocasions i que vull fer-li comentar, que parla en el llibre, tot un capítol li dediquen a això, és el transhumanisme, no? Que té a veure amb aquesta idea de que la computació, la intel·ligència artificial serà una cosa del dia a dia i que hi hem d'estar-hi abocats. I el transhumanisme, el defineixo, és un moviment internacional que té com a objectiu final transformar la condició humana mitjançant el desenvolupament i la fabricació de tecnologia àmpliament disponibles, que millorin les capacitats humanes tant a nivell físic, psicològic o intel·lectual. Són aquests que creuen que ens implantaran xips, que ens faran pensar més ràpid, millor, amb més potència. I sobre aquesta tendència cap al transhumanisme, en un capítol el professor Damasio diu el següent. Diu, sobre quina base és justificable intentar millorar la nostra capacitat de memòria o el nostre calibre intel·lectual per mitjans genètics en lloc de fer-ho intentant resoldre trencaclosques intel·lectuals? I què hi ha dels trets físics? El color dels ulls, el color de la pell, els trets de la cara, l'altura... I què hi ha de la manipulació de la proporció entre homes i dones? Tenen els futurs pares el dret a decidir sobre la constitució física o intel·lectual de la seva descendència? Què dimonis és el que els pares intenten garantir o evitar? Quin problema existeix per a un ésser humà, un desenvolupament, a enfrontar-se a la qüestió de la sort o de l'atzar i definir el seu propi destí mitjançant la combinació de la pròpia força de voluntat i els dons o defectes amb els quals un ha nascut? Què té de dolent formar el nostre caràcter gràcies a la superació de la nostra mala sort inicial durant el nostre desenvolupament o ser modests quan els dons ens posseïm són desfavorables? Per què renunciar a la immortalitat? Quina concepció d'humanitat denota aquest esforç de l'ésser humà per ser etern? En termes d'homeostasi bàsica, la immortalitat és perfecció, la realització d'un somni mai somiat de la naturalesa de la perpetuïtat de la vida.
Well,
no està mal.
One of the things that is very important in the book, and it's an idea that appears in the first part every once in a while and appears a lot in chapter 4, and then it appears in the last part. And it's the idea that contrary to what most people talk about, minds are not the creation of brains alone. There's this very, very narrow view that says, well, we have a nervous system, and it's the nervous system alone that creates the mind. And a lot of problems have existed in cognitive science and in philosophy of mind precisely because of that bad beginning. Well, that's simply not true. The mind is created by a cooperation between the nervous system and the body. The two things have to be working together. There is no mind if there is no body. It's an absurdity. If you look at the time of life on Earth, it's, as I've said a couple of times in relation to bacteria, about 4 billion years. How long have we had nervous system? Nervous systems have existed for about 500 million years. It's a little bit of the time of life on Earth. What does this mean? It means that life has proceeded very well without the help of nervous systems. So, what are we talking about? Why do we have nervous systems? Well, we have nervous systems because they are servants to the body. Nervous systems help the body coordinate a lot of complex subsystems. You know what they coordinate? They coordinate the immune system, the endocrine system, and circulation. That's why nervous systems first came about, because you needed to coordinate those different parts, otherwise bodies could not grow. In order to have, when you had very teeny creatures, it was easy to coordinate it all just with chemical molecules circulating in pathways. Once you get a creature of our size, or bigger, no, not even our size, you need the circulation to distribute in energy and to remove wastes. You need an endocrine system to control metabolism. You need an immune system to defend yourself against attacks from, for example, insects. And when that happens, you need to have this coordination that comes with the nervous system. And so the nervous system is not the where-all and be-all, the most important thing. It happens that it has, with the help of the body, created a very complicated mind, and that is now doing things that are no longer necessary for the basic coordination. That's the way it evolved. But to begin with, it was there to serve the interests of life in the body. And that's why when people, I've had a couple of public debates with people that are transhumanists. And I had one not too long ago. By coincidence, actually, it happened in Madrid this fall. And there was this person who's a British scholar, very intelligent, very remarkable person, who is convinced that he's going to upload his mind into computers in the cloud, and that he's going to live forever. And I said, well, are you planning to upload your body as well, or just your mind? And he said, well, just the mind. And I said, well, but your mind is tied to the cells of your nervous system, which are tied to the cells of the rest of the body, and it exists because they've been together. It's completely silly to think that you're going to pick up on electrical potentials and move them into a computer, and is that going to be yourself? What is it? Again, the problem is that people are giving short shrift, no attention to the feelings, because it is quite possible to pick up on a lot of factual information that is in our brains and put that in a computer. But what has that got to do with who we are as persons? Who we are as persons is a combination of the facts of our life and of what we have felt along our life. Without that, it's not ourselves. It's some kind of machine, but what distinguishes us as individuals is that combination of what has happened to us and what we have felt about what has happened and what we feel about what may happen. Because keep in mind that every day you're making memories not just of what has happened, but you're also making memories of your plans. You now know, probably at this point, you're thinking, this guy better shut up so that I can go and have dinner. Well, that's, you have thought that plan, a very admirable plan, and you have made a memory of it. And you have, I'm sure you have plans about how you're going to spend Easter or your vacations this summer. What is that? It's what Hannah and I like to call memories of the future. And we say, oh, this is bizarre. How can you have a memory of the future? Well, we do. We're constantly telling ourselves stories about what we want to do. And we memorize them. And we, of course, we also have the memories of the past, which is, of course, what people think more often than not, what I like to call Proustian memories. But we have the memories of the future that are very important. And that's why we humans are so unique. Our really, really exceptional state comes from the fact that, in all probability, only we humans have this huge amount of memory, not just of the past, but of the future. And the possibility that when we suffer, or when we are in joy, that suffering and that joy is in that setting, is in the setting of what we remember. That's the important thing.
Em sap greu, però haurem d'anar acabant. Jo em quedaria aquí més temps, me van dir que no podem ser per tota la nit, és una llàstima.
Because they need dinner.
Yeah, why not?
I need dinner. I need a good glass of Priorat.
Però voldria acabar únicament perquè ens contestés a una cosa que diu ell al final. Fa un diagnòstic realment una mica preocupant de la societat contemporània i acaba amb una frase dient quina és la meva actitud respecte a aquesta situació. I diu, preocupat però esperançat o preocupat i sense esperança. Diu, no és possible decidir quin d'aquests dos escenaris hipotètics té més probabilitats d'ocórrer. A veure si ens dona una miqueta d'homeostasi positiva i acabem...
As far as I'm concerned, it depends on the day and on the hour. Right now I am in a rather positive, optimistic mood. But I have to say that when you read, like for example in the past few days, I'm sure several of you read about how private information from about 50 million people was moved out of Facebook and given to a company called Cambridge Analytics, which operates in the UK, but which has been helping all sorts of elections in many parts of the world, in Europe as well as in the United States, and basically torpedoing those elections and making them go in the direction that people wanted. So when you think about that, you really worry that there's not much to be optimistic about, because it could, our democracies have been under threat for a long time and things go up and down. But if that's the way things are going to go, then we have no hope. So I hope that it's not the case, and that the fact that we know gives us a possibility of reacting and of reorienting that process. And so I think that if we can survive a period of great instability and not destroy ourselves with nuclear and chemical weapons, and if we realize that there is now a new game which has to do with digital information, and that has both wonderful things. I just before this meeting, I called my assistant in Los Angeles. I dictated 5 or 6 letters. I answered lots of mail. I couldn't do this even 5 years ago. It's terrific. And I was inside this basement of La Pedrera, and I was doing all this, and she's in Los Angeles. This is obviously something spectacular, and it's important to have. But this also brings enormous dangers, and people need to be aware of that, because then, if you're not, then we're in trouble. Then there's no priorat that can save us.
Esperem que no sigui així. Bé, doncs, ho haurem de deixar aquí. Habitualment en el protocol d'aquestes converses no hi ha preguntes, o sigui que no podrem oferir-los l'oportunitat de preguntar-li amb ell. Hem d'acabar d'aquesta manera i hem d'agrair-li al professor Damasio d'estar aquí i a vostès per haver estat aquí.